think we are all here. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of UTEMA, our funding partner, the European Union in Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and our advocacy partner, Women Deliver 2019, I welcome you all to this conversation on women's rights and gender equality in the Maldives. Firstly, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our special guest and respected elder, Madam Mumina Halim, who is the first Maldivian woman cabinet minister as she took her portfolio as the Minister of Health in January 1977. It is an honor and a great pleasure to have you here with us today, Madam Mumina. Thank you. We are saddened that our EU colleagues based in Sri Lanka cannot be here today, and we join the people of the world in extending our deepest condolences to our neighbors in Sri Lanka. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families affected by the terrible violence in Sri Lanka that Sri Lanka was subjected to on peaceful people in prayer at places of worship and places of rest. Let me give you a brief overview of our organization, UTEMA. The primary objective of UTEMA is to advocate for gender equality and women's empowerment in the Maldives. UTEMA seeks to understand the lived experiences of women in the Maldives and use that knowledge to advocate for positive social, cultural, economic, and political change to improve the lives of women. We have a particular interest in local, national, and international research, knowledge building and dissemination, as well as creating constructive conversations on the status of women in the Maldives. It is in this spirit that we convene here today to have a dialogue on women's rights in the Maldives. As I searched for some words of wisdom from a woman that reflects our event today, I came across these words by an American actress, singer, and stage director, Felicia Rashad. She said, "Anytime women come together with a collective intention, it's a powerful thing. Whether it's sitting down making a quilt, in a kitchen preparing a meal, in a club reading the same books, or around the table playing cards, or planning a birthday party. When women come together with a collective intention, magic happens." I hope that with our conversation and dialogue today, we can inform, educate, and inspire girls, women, and men around the world to make magic happen for a safer, equitable, equal, and just world for all of us. Thank you. May I respectfully request Madam Mumina to say a few words to open this conversation. Madam Mumina.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Barak gina zaman beca gun mikha kamu mudadwata. Namos tibefung edwala edwalat maki gam hiri mitarangas. Aguna bada rangal tibefung aguna swal kure biya. Swal kure was swal ka jawab dewe to balana. Then agun kiya bagen ama Ahmed Hilmi pampul deker minister ka hunne Ahmed Hilmi engevi itanat da. Pampul deken dang ofiyat diyama engevi maabar miha ko banduguri sati atwejja komme gadi ekkama bes agun dammane. Agun kiyevi kohaki nursing midwifery and public health joint kohe a Christian Medical College and Hospital in Bello. That was a good college and that was a good course. I was happy from the very beginning that public health was included in it. And in my postgraduate course in Australia also, I did some public health there. I was very happy in India. We had a Tamil Pandit who came and asked the name of the President of India. We had 32 students in the class, and everybody got up and gave names till the last, that I was me, the last one, 28th one. And nobody gave the name that I knew. So I got up and said Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and he was the president then. And the Pandit was quite surprised, that lecturer who came to teach us Tamil. He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from the Maldives." From that day on, I became Miss Maldives to him. Every day he came to class, he looked around. Every day I would go and sit at the back in the same place I was sitting. Every day he would call me, and I have to come and sit in front. I was avoiding sitting there because he had no teeth in front. And every time his 4 teeth were gone, every time he spoke, I had a spray of a little bit of his sputum coming to me, so I had to keep on going backwards like this every day, but I still continued till the end. But one thing I was also surprised was I was the only one who was not Indian there. I was the only one who knew their president's name. For that, I have to thank Mr. Amin Didi, Muhammad Amin Didi, who started educating the Maldivian girls first. And it was he who told us when we were in Sri Lanka, we get the newspapers here every day, read the newspapers. So we made sure somehow we'll find that newspaper and managed to read that newspaper. And that is how I found out this president's name also. When there were 31 other people who didn't know their president's name, I did know that. And I have to thank Mr. Amin Didi for that, educating the women and also teaching us to do these things. I would rather you ask me any more questions because I think I've said enough now. Yeah, yeah.
We will have a conversation a little later.
Yeah. There were 10 women who wrote a letter to me, giving that, saying, "Please stand for elections, we would like to stand for mine." And I stood for it. I did stand for elections. But it was no matter whether it was one of them, there were 10 women who wrote a letter.
As we open, I think I will just repeat what Anissa has just told us. She explained that Madam Mumina is the first woman elected MP in the Maldives too. Now this is a fantastic piece of information that we didn't have before. Thank you so much,
I
Anissa.
stood for election because 10 women wrote me a letter with their names and signature was on it, and one of them was a mother. I remember that very well. Asking me to stand for election. I told them I was very busy, I didn't have time, but they said, "No, we only have parliament meetings at night, and once in 3 months, you have one night and you just come and put your hand up and you go." And I said, "I'm very sorry, I can't put my hand up and go. I'm not a person who can do that either." So I said, "It's all right, but please come, please stand for election." So I said, "I have no time asking people to vote for me." He said, "No, we will do that," she said. And I got elected, yes.
Thank you so much. I shall pass the floor to Deepa.
Sorry, this isn't entirely my thing either. So, I'm given the task of moderating this session. So, may I introduce the panelists? First of all, to my right is Humaida Abdul Ghafoor, who is co-founder of Uthema and an independent social researcher with interest in a variety of social issues affecting the lived realities of women in the Maldives. She's also well-versed in gender equality, politics, justice, environment, and participation in public life. And next to her is Aisha Shujun Muhammad. She is a lawyer by profession and has been an advocate in gender issues for over 20 years. And Ms. Shujun is a strong advocate is a person who has advocated for strengthening of legislative framework promoting gender equality. And next to her is Shadia Ibrahim. She's from the UNFPA and has over 20 years of experience there. She's a strong advocate for gender equality, women's rights, and a number of social issues. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So Shadia is also extremely versed in gender matters. So if I may, I'll try to start off. I'm Deebanaz Fahmi, and I'm a lawyer by profession. So in order to get this going, I'd just ask the panelists to perhaps give us a brief overview of how they came to be involved in gender equality and gender women's rights, advocacy, and so forth. And from there on, after discussing a little bit about it, we'll open the floor for conversation and questions from the audience as well, so that I think it more inclusive and participatory conversation would be productive for all of us. So I'll hand over to Hugme first. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to hand over to Shadia, actually. Go on, Shadia.
All right. Okay, so how I got interested in from gender equality and women's rights, yeah. Actually, without knowing that, I was standing for women's rights, was when I was a child, 16 years old. And at that time, because I grew up in a Malay family, my parents were servants in there, and in there, we were in a very male-dominant household. And for some reason, and I don't know, we were doing everything that a normal child in a family would do. And one day, one of the person tried to, rape me. And I thought, oh my God, this is not what I want. And when I gave the news to my mom, and she said, that's because of how you behaved. And I thought, from that onwards, I knew, this, I didn't do anything bad, and I knew I am not going to stand for that, and I knew I was going to share the story, and I knew this is what I will stand for. And that was not the only time I had this experience. When I was in UK also, in the United Kingdom, when I was doing my BSc, that was also a time where I had an incident like that. And then on I realized, okay, this is not something which is, unique to Maldives or unique to anywhere else. This is something that the women of the world are facing. And that injustice, I knew that it's not because of, the way I behave or what I wore or what I believe. It's just because some people have undue power over. So, and I have also been hearing, and my parents used to say that, my mouth was born before me because, I am very talkative. I don't, even in these incidents, I go and share with people. I tell people that, this is not what is right. And because of that, I have that label as well. So, and as I have been working in the field for over many years, I know that, if you if you are fitting into society, you can't change anything. So you have to have that sort of some level of disobedience, craziness, unfitness into the society to be able to stand up for what is not in the status quo. And I think that is where I learned that, this is something that I have to stand up for the women in the Maldives.
Thank you everyone for coming here. Well, my story is, when I was a teenager, I was very rebellious. So those of you who knew me back then, I suppose would know that I was told often that I will not get a job, I will not achieve anything because I was not fitting into the norm. I was always arguing with someone. So when I finally finished A-levels, I was, during that time there was mandatory service at NSS. So I was signed up for that, but fortunately the President's office wanted to hire me back then, and I was taken off the NSS roster, which is where I met Miss Anissa. She did interview me, but unfortunately, because there were no vacancies, I couldn't go in there. So after spending about 7 months idle, I applied for the Foreign Ministry, who refused me because I was on the President's office wanted list, I suppose. And then finally, because I was staying idle for so long, I was finally given the opportunity to apply elsewhere, and if I would get the job to go wherever, which is when I joined the then Ministry of Women's Affairs and Social Security. And while I didn't really realize being told off by everyone for being very vocal and things like that back then, that this was why I was doing it, I think it was at the Ministry of Women's Affairs that I realized that this was what was really happening. And later, guided by Ms. Rashda Yusuf and Anissa primarily, I advanced there quite a lot. But then at the end of the day, I finally did decide to do law because I realized that there were so many issues that affected women. However, nothing was really happening because there was no framework, there was no backing for them, there was no really support system. So that was when I decided to do law. However, after finishing law, I had to go and work with the Ministry of Justice, which was, at least, at that time, a very archaic institution, and I was the only common law graduate, and then being a woman, that wasn't very helpful. So I did say my 3 handicaps were I was young, I was female, and I didn't do Sharia law. And yeah, so that's where it all started, and then I started to do a lot of work from the ministry and then afterwards, and I've been at it for a while now. Thank you.
Well, I can't beat those stories. But rebel, yes. That's what we do. I think rebellion is necessary because conforming does not help. And that is, because rebellion comes because we have no choice. And the reason why we are all here perhaps is because we thought differently. We believed that we deserved better, and we believed that we should do better and can do better and will do better. So I guess if I were to look back, my life took me outside of the Maldives for quite some time. So I got to see the world a little bit. But before then, my act of rebellion, I guess, was by refusing to go to SEC after joining it, because all our teachers left. And I said, what's the point of going there when we have no teachers to teach us. And after some disagreement with my mother, which I often do, I left and found work, and I started working at the Ministry of Tourism. It wasn't a ministry then, it was the Department of Tourism. And I was always driven to study, but I never had that opportunity at that time. And I was able, the only study available to me at that time in Male was to go to hotel school, which I did. And I did quite well. But then that required me, after a year of schooling, to have placement in the industry. And once again, I had to rebel because it was not good for a woman or a girl to go out and work in a resort. This is not acceptable. So I had to fight my way to get out there and do my thing, which I did. So I think very early on, I got used to doing things differently. I got used to having to say, look, this is my life, this is how I want to do this, and I should be able to do this. But if I am to fast forward a little bit later, I always thought that Maldives was this wonderful place where everybody was kind and generous and good. I think that was kind of the environment I was growing up in many, many years ago. When I came back to live in Male in 2007, one of the first pieces of research I looked at was the women's health and life experiences in Maldives. A piece of research that was done to understand the extent of violence against women in the Maldives by trailblazers like Anissa, who were fighting to get this research done. And I happened to pick this up, and I learned something that was pretty horrific. The extent of violence in this country was unbelievable. I didn't think this is the country that I came from. I did not think this is the society that I grew up in. So this is a part of life in our country that is so well hidden, even from us. Maybe when we see it, we don't even believe it. When we experience it, we accept it because it's normal. But it's not normal. It's not normal to accept violence. It's not normal to have your life destroyed by violence. It's not normal to accept and do nothing or watch this. And that is one of my driving forces, to understand the lived realities of women in Maldives. And of course, violence is only a very telling sign of the situation of a people. And the violence that is so prevalent in so many ways comes from accepted norms that are culturally so embedded that nobody questions these things. But we have to question these things. And when we begin to question these things, we go further and further and further into what are the causes, what are the root causes of what is happening with us, what is happening in our society. And I think that is why I find myself fighting on gender equality issues, violence against women issues, justice issues, environment issues, because all these things are interlinked. They do not stand alone. You can't just focus on one issue, because one person experiences multiple issues, and it manifests in so many ways. So here we are, trying to talk about all these issues, but to create a dialogue so that it goes beyond us, and it hopefully will land inside people's minds, that they will begin to think and begin to believe differently, violence is not okay. Discrimination is not okay. To have no access to resources is not okay because of your gender. It's not okay, and it's not normal, and it's unacceptable. And I think all of us will agree that the conversation we have started, we are joining a conversation, a fight that goes beyond any time that we know of. Because women have been fighting for equal rights for as long as we know humans have walked this earth, probably. So these are the systems of oppression that women are trying to address. And I hope through this conversation, we can magnify and extend this conversation across our communities, our families, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. I'm sure that we have heard quite a lot of common factors which resonates with all of us. And I'd like, since we're talking about bridging the gap, I'd like to talk about, invite the panelists on their thoughts on women's participation in public life and what are the difficulties and challenges that are faced by women. Because of the pre-existing, preconceived notions of society as to how women should act, behave in public, or what they are capable of. So may I invite the panelists?
Well, I can only tell you about, well, I suppose I'm aware of other people's experiences, but let me start by my own. When I went into the Ministry of Justice, like I said, after having studied law, with my 3 handicaps, what I realized was I was constantly undermined, and it was women in the ministry, the lawyers, were usually pushed around. But what happened was, if you're a man, and if you came into the ministry and if you have a degree, you automatically, despite whether you had any experience or not, you became a judge. If it was a woman, you became assistant legal officer, which I was. Yeah? So I wrote to the then president, for which I never, of course, got a reply, inquiring why this was the case. And I was sort of reprimanded for that as well. But of course, it begs the question, because why are all these men becoming judges and why are not women becoming judges, and why have there never been female judges? So, and even within the ministry, it became a constant fight. And some people would come and say, oh, Shujun, we're going over to Bangkok, would you like to come? They're like, excuse me? Because this was very normal for them. This was to push women around, to make inappropriate gestures or inappropriate comments were very, very commonplace. So when it came to me, I would, of course, respond back, and that wasn't taken very well. However, it also started to build a culture whereby they would stop making such comments when I was there, because I would always argue. And it also came to the point that finally, when there were, because the Ministry of Justice back at that time had, with regards to the family law, say for example, they had powers to amend the regulations, etc. So at the time when some of the family law regulations, I'm just giving you one example, were being amended, one of the things I was trying to push was that men cannot remarry unless they pay child custody. And there was a lot of my male colleagues were not very happy with it because they thought it was a man's right to get married, of course. But then after many arguments, some of my colleagues then threatened to actually resign if I managed to push that through, which I did, was that men would not be able to marry unless they had settled all child maintenance payments. So things like that we were able to push through, but the culture in such an environment was, least of all to say, difficult. And until I resigned from the justice, from the Justice Ministry, I went on to the civil courts, and until I resigned from the civil court, a lot of women would come to me, irrespective of whether they were from the civil court or not, seeking my advice as to how to tackle issues and to seek my intervention for some reason, because they thought I was the one who could stand up for them and not many of their colleagues. So even within institutions which are supposed to be delivering justice, this is how the mindset was. But I'm not blaming the institution per se, but it's much more that this is something we grow up with, because men are entitled for more, and men can say as they please, whereas women should basically shut up and do whatever they're asked. So this is the reality. Things change slowly, I suppose, but I think we still have a long way to go. So, yeah.
Okay, starting from Sujun, where you left, and I think, okay, I will constantly refer to my own life experience because that's something that can enrich, like, the discussions. And, I have experienced many discrimination. It's not only because I was a woman, but because I was also from an island, not from Malay, but also from poor families and all that. So one of the first discrimination, I thought, okay, during the time when I graduated high school, A-level school in 88, this is I'm talking about, I'm also making me sound like, old, but, that time, like, anybody who graduated A-level will get a job. But unfortunately, I did not, because of all these social exclusion factors, not just because of being a woman, but because of all the other factors. So being a woman alone sometimes is not discriminatory, but with all the other factors, it can really give you, like, very less opportunities. And by having gone through that, I didn't get a job. And I was also, like, at that time, the best 5 students from A-level will get the British High Commission scholarship automatically. And in that year, I was the 5th, and that year only 4 people got the scholarship. So from there onwards, like, I've been having all this, I've been living through this. And luckily, fortunately, I got the chance to go and study in UK. And because of that, I didn't have a bond. And upon graduation, when I came back, that is why I got the chance to work in the UN. And I joined UN in '97, and also for the first project of European funding, empowerment of women, where, that was the first time we introduced revolving funds. We provided scholarship for girls to come and complete the A-levels in Malay, and a lot of things that we have taken for granted. And I remember walking from home to home to see, like, what were the challenges for women to come and work in public life. And the biggest challenge then and now is having children. Yeah. I was lucky because my mom was alive and she was ready to take care of my children. When I joined UNFPA, my older son was only 9 months old. And that demanded also for me to work in the UN for very long hours. But my mom never complained. She took care of my kids, and I was also at the time going from home to home, door to door, to see what would be the optimal kind of a daycare facility for women to really be in the labor force or contributing to the economy. Until today, how many years, maybe more than 20 years, we still do not have an adequate daycare facility. And we have not been able to change the caring role, the informal work, the burden from the woman to share with. And we have changed immense in this country, but this is an area where we have stagnated and not moving. And sometimes I ponder why we have not made that change. Why is it that, we are still 20, 30 years behind when it comes to childcare and, all that. And I'm thinking that, maybe because I'm also in a position where we do a lot of policy advocacy. And very often we think of the average or more. We've not thought about the person who is farthest behind. I also had an opportunity the other day when the Haveli, the NGO forum was there, and to moderate a session on inclusion. And by inclusion, I mean not just being women, also different age groups, different abilities, and because human beings are not the same, we are diverse bunch of people in this world, so different people have different needs. And they were talking about social protection, pension, and all this. And they were saying, okay, people who retire from civil service, there must be some means and ways to, take care of them and all that. And I thought, hang on a minute. My father worked his entire life, and he couldn't get a home in Male or elsewhere in the country because he was in an informal working position. And this, I thought, okay, if we have not been able to change about the people who are left behind or the fathers first, we will never make this change. And it is in the context of the sustainable development goals that every country has, committed to, and saying that, we are saying that we will bring the fathers first in policy making. And unless and until we get that done, I don't think we will be able to make a meaningful change. So I'll stop here, but I still have a lot to talk. Maybe we can contribute.
Okay. I just want to add a little bit to what Shadia was saying. In the 1970s, I understand that the Maldives was one of the poorest countries in South Asia. Today, we are one of the richest. But my question is, how are we rich? In what way are we rich? What quality of life do we have? When I travel for my work out of Male, I do not see rich people. I do not see people living in beautiful homes, comfortable homes, with plumbing and electricity assured. I recently went to Kurdufushi. I stayed in a home where they had groundwater. It smells. And that is not a sign of a very rich country, in my opinion. So when we become money rich, maybe we have some rich people. And this way of counting our riches leaves about 8% of people in Male below the poverty line. This is not rich. This is a failure. So when we talk about inclusivity, when we talk about how we measure the wealth of a nation, I think we need to go beyond just the notes, the paper notes. We have women in this country, as I think it has been mentioned, as Shujun said, she tried to stop men marrying who could not or did not provide child maintenance. I think that's a great thing to do. It should be law, in fact. Because this practice, this behavior creates poverty. It leaves women trapped in conditions where they cannot lift themselves above this poverty line. And we go about thinking and measuring our riches in this way. The inclusivity issue is one of our biggest problems. We have such few women working in our largest industry, which is the tourism industry. We have a huge imbalance when it comes to public service employment. We have a pay gap of about 20%. Women are paid less than men. There is discrimination. We do not acknowledge it. It's a bit like that violence thing, It happens, it's normal, it's just the way it is, it's life. No, this is not life. We do not have to accept this life. And our acceptance is our failure. Our acceptance of an 8% population below the poverty line in Mali is our failure. We are not rich. So I think we need to reframe how we look at wealth, how we look at our own quality of life and richness. And I think it's time women began to believe that they deserve better, they deserve more, and they deserve an equal chance. Something on paper is not enough. It has to work for people in their lived experiences. And that's what we advocate for.
Thank you, Humalda. And thank you, panelists. I was wondering if since Madam Mumina is also here, I was wondering if I may pose a question to her as to her experiences and whether the situation has changed for women in public life compared to how it was in the 70s or during that time, and as to how they are describing their situation here today. And I was about to pass it to her just after posing the question. Thank you, though. Yeah. So
I grew up in a household with a lot of strong women. We didn't have men in the house. Because when my father was, when I was just born, I was 5 months old or something, my father had a school friend who had leprosy, and he thought he also had leprosy. He showed that spot on his body, some skin spot, and from that day on, we never knew a father in the house because he was isolated in his mother's house. His mother's house is a big lot of land, so they had a small house built for them. And as a leprosy patient, he stayed there for 8-9 years before we could get a chance to take him to Sri Lanka for somebody to take a look and say he never ever had leprosy. But there he was. So I grew up with Ismail Rashid. He's no more, but some of you may know Mandatulge Ismail Rashid. She used to say, Mutta, you're a very lucky person. You grew up in a house with a lot of strong women. I had a great-grandfather who was sick by the time I was young, and then he died, and he died with diarrhea, by the way. When you have diarrhea, they don't give you fluid at all then. If you have diarrhea, you don't get fluid. So leave alone IV, not even a glass of water. So he slowly died with his diarrhea, and he was his great-grandfather, so at 70-something he died. Before he was 70, he had died. So then we had a lot of strong women. And Ismail Rashid used to say, But they were lucky you grew up with a lot of strong women in the house. There was a grandmother, there was a mother who had to do everything herself. So we were really, I grew up surrounded with a lot of good, strong women.
Thank you so much. And I'm wondering whether Miss Anisa could also add to her experiences in public life as serving the public as a person who has worked for a long time as a member of parliament and in many other strong posts in public. So are the challenges any different? So where and how do you think that we should be bridging this gap? We're talking about bridging the gap, but what are the challenges that are available to, that are present in our society, and how do you think that we may actually be able to overcome some of them or even move towards bridging that gap?
Thank you. Let me also start with my own experience first. As a little girl, I grew up with a single parent, my mother. And like Madam Mumina said, she was an advocate for women's rights even then, because I remember her always telling us, you girls, because my younger sister and I have to be educated just like the boys, because you have to grow up and be self-reliant. You should never depend on people. So that was always at the back of my mind, even when I was in school. Well, after I did my O-levels, because I belonged to that first batch of Maldivians to do O-level in the Maldives. We were just 4 of us, 4 girls. Soon after we did our exams, even before we got the results, we were summoned to the Ministry of Education. I don't know if it's the right term anyway. We were asked to go to the Ministry of Education. The minister met us and said, all 4 of you have to go to New Zealand to do, for your higher studies, to become teachers. I never wanted to become a teacher. So I said, sir, sorry, I don't want to be a teacher. But he said, but the government has decided to send all of you to New Zealand to do teaching because we need teachers, because we just started English medium education then. So I said, but I can't be a teacher. I don't want to be a teacher. How can the government decide what I have to do? So from then on, he said, okay, you stay. The other three were sent to New Zealand for their education. 1 year later, I said I wanted to be a nurse. I don't know for why, you know, I don't know the reason why I wanted to become a nurse. Anyway, I wanted to become a nurse. So 1 year later, I was taken to Ministry of Health. Unfortunately or fortunately, the minister of that time, education minister then, was the Minister of Health. So it's the same minister I had to go to. He said to me, now you are going to get a scholarship, but to India, to do your nursing. I said, sir, I did not request you to send me to India or New Zealand to do my, nursing. I don't even know the difference. I didn't know the difference then. New Zealand, Australia, India, Sri Lanka, all the same to me, because I've never been to any place other than Sri Lanka. So I said, it doesn't matter where I go. What matters is what I want to do. So that was my life, how it began. And I was a nurse. I came back. I was serving first with Madam Mumina in the hospital. Then later on, when she became the Minister of Health, I was put in touch. I also did some postgraduate studies in Australia like she did. And I was working as the nurse in charge of the nursing service at that time. One day, I got a call to say I was to be transferred to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was told, this is what the president wants. But this is one senior official from the president's secretariat at that time called me and said, the president would like to know what you say about it. I said, no, immediately. So he says, I think he was shocked. He said, you can't say no when the president says this. I said, look, what you are telling me is the president wants to find out what I say about it. Just tell him no. This is not what you are telling him. You're just conveying my message. So anyway, then I was told later, the president wanted a woman in foreign service because there were no women at that time. So I had to think about it twice. If I say no, perhaps no other woman will be ever given that opportunity. So it was a very hard decision for me to make because I just loved what I was doing. And I knew I could challenge anybody at that time, that nobody else would have been able to do it any better than I was doing. So anyway, then I went to Foreign Service. From there, I don't know if I was graduated or demoted to the President's Secretariat. Then finally, I went to Ministry of Women's Affairs. All this time, since 1979, this was the first time the government of that time started thinking about women's rights, because it was the UN decade for women. So since 79, there was a small committee formed. This was how, it became the ministry later on. I was on it. And I used to always, get the leader of the committee to criticize or to question the government for decisions they were making. One day, there was a circular from the President's Secretariat saying, from now on, no married woman will be given a scholarship. And I was still a nurse in the hospital at that time. I saw this because I was the nursing service in charge. So I got also a copy of that. So immediately I called Partner Jamil, who was heading the committee at that time. I said, look, have you seen this circular? She said, no. I said, please have a look at it. Then I said, we have to fight for this. And she said, how do we do that? I said, ask for an appointment with the president. I didn't know how you even get an appointment at that time. But I said, ask for an appointment. So she said, are you willing to come with me? I said, yes, I will go. So we went. President gave us an appointment, so we went. RMD, Partner Jamil and I. So I said, he just questioned us, why are you meeting us, why meeting me? He said, because of this circular. I said, that is discrimination against women. Partner Jamil asked me to talk, so because she wasn't talking, so I said, that's discrimination against women. Immediately, he became very defensive. He said, no, it's not discrimination at all. Do you know what happened? And I had done some homework at that time, so I knew the background of this. There was one young woman who was offered a scholarship to go to Australia. She was married. She didn't know she was pregnant when she went there. She found out later that she was pregnant after she went there. So that time, Australian government policy was, because if you're pregnant, they didn't want to take the responsibility, so they send you back. So he said this was an opportunity somebody else could have utilized. Because she was pregnant, this happened. I said, look, how many boys come back having failed in their exams? That's also an opportunity lost. So finally, after this argument, they actually dissolved that circular. So it wasn't, how will I say, implemented anymore. So I'm trying to say you have to fight for these things. Only then some things change. Then you were, even as you were saying, I was in politics, of course. I was in politics when our constitution barred women from even becoming a judge. Shujun is one of the two women judges who appointed. Until 1998, our constitution barred women from becoming a judge. So during the discussion, I was a member of parliament at that time, member of Constitutional Assembly too. During the discussion, I just asked a question. I said, why can't a woman be a judge? Then the response was from a religious perspective. It is because it's an Islamic country. I said, look, how many Islamic countries have women judges? Like Indonesia, for instance, the largest most Muslim population in a country. So there was an argument. The Minister of Justice of that time, during this discussion said to me, it's very easy, there are so many foreign journalists who come to meet me. They ask me, why isn't there even a single judge, a woman? So I always tell them, because the Constitution does not allow it. So I said, sir, if I were the Justice Minister, I would say, there aren't actually too many women who have actually done law and come back, because there were hardly anybody at that time. So that's an easy question, and you're being honest to them, instead of giving the blame or putting the blame on the Constitution. So the discussion of that day was stopped. The president was presiding at that particular meeting. And a day later, there was a decision made at the cabinet level that my proposal was right. There was no need for it to be in the Constitution. 2 days later, when we had the sitting of the Parliament of the Constituent Assembly, that particular man who objected strongly, not the justice minister, another minister who strongly objected to having women as judges, proposed the amendment. So my purpose was served. I wasn't going to, I wasn't asking for taking the credit for it, but I wanted the change. So change does happen, but not always. Later on, while in my, experience as a parliamentarian, there was a lot of problems being a woman. There were so many times I was personally attacked in the sense it was for my personal life was always talked about, not the issue I was on. So never discussions, debate was not on the issue, but me as a person. There were people who used to say, you are non-Muslim, that is why you went alone for campaigning and now coming and sitting here. So I said, I'm not a Muslim because you think I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim by choice. I am a Muslim because I want to be a Muslim. So it's very difficult. Things really have not changed. And now, in a way, I feel we are regressing in certain aspects. I just don't know how to deal with this. I think, policymakers have always, not just now, always never committed or never implemented their commitments. It's always a lot of rhetoric. Every change of government, all the policymakers will say, no, we want gender mainstreamed, we want gender equality, or women and men are equal. But it's never practiced. It's never implemented. So personally, I would say I still don't know. I'm at a loss even now how we do it. Like, for instance, this time, there were times when he had 12% of women as parliamentarians. Well, at that time, because actually the constitution provided for presidential nominations. So the president, towards his president of the time, had 50-50, 4 women and 4 men. So we had a greater percentage of women in the parliament. Now every time it's declining. Since we actually migrated into this liberal democracy we call and so proud of our constitution. And this time, we had the largest number of women contesting the election. And all of them, I would say, are much more highly qualified to be parliamentarians of the current, situation. But why only 4 women elected? And those 4, even now, I would say, are the most qualified, most experienced in the parliament that's newly elected. So we need to do a lot of work, but I am not able to pinpoint and say what we have to do. But I still feel, policy commitment will be stronger and to have the policies implemented. Thank you.
No, just one observation from picking up from where you said, Anissa. What I've found is that if you're a woman, you're always asked for your qualifications, what your credentials are, etc. But if you're a man, it doesn't really matter because we're not usually. You're a man. You're a man. So no, but really, wherever, like, since when I was a teenager to now, every time I go or whatever I do personally, and I'm sure many of you have experienced the same. If I want to do something, or what's your qualification? Like down to when you're doing trainings for other people, me being the trainer, they will ask me, what is your qualification? But it would not be requested for from a male counterpart, because as a woman, you've got to prove yourself, or have that qualification, otherwise, God forbid, you even walk the same road, I suppose.
Yeah, I also wanted to add to, Anissa has triggered me as well. You are right, we are regressing in many ways, because when we look at the data, we know. In the 17th Majlis, we had 6.5%, which is 5 out of 77. It's a terrible number. And then it got worse in the Majlis 18, which dropped to 5.9, 5 out of 85. And now we have dropped down to an all-time low of 4.6%. Now this is getting embarrassing, it should be embarrassing to the men too, I think, because it reflects badly on the views and attitudes of men when we are in such bad political, social, economic situation, and yet there is this huge push to exclude women from decision making. Wherever we look, we find this discrimination. We do not discuss it. We say, well, the opportunities are there, women are just not coming forward. But this is actually a very strange response. You know, it's like saying, well, the sea is there, why don't you swim? You know? Well, we know the sea is there. But does, you know, I mean, we wouldn't have swimming instructors if the sea was there and we could all swim in it. We wouldn't need to pay good money to go and learn to swim. But this is the attitude we have, and I think the situation of the new Majlis being so unbalanced from a gender perspective, we will have to suffer for it. We will have to suffer for it for the next 5 years and longer, because the laws that will be coming out of this Majlis will be serving men. And I say this in all seriousness, because this is not funny. This is not funny because men actually do not know how best to work in the best interest of everyone. But I believe women will, because they go out of their way to take care of their children. We know how many parents, how many single mothers look after their children single-handedly. We know how many women are working, studying, taking care of the family, and that is why we have the care work, such a huge imbalance in care work. We have 50% more time spent by women doing household work and care work, than men, even when they are both in work.
Just before I hand over to Shadia, I'd also like to bring up the issue of quota system and the difficulties of actually trying to start a discourse on quota system as well. And just as they said, the rest of the panelists said, it's available. Meritocracy comes up. Women should get there based on merit. So about the obstacles to having, or the obstacles to even starting a discourse on quota system.
I think I will also add to my previous speakers as well. And I think, you know, one of the biggest issues that the women who have been in portfolios as council members or otherwise say, like, you know, you can hold that post as long as you do take care of the family, as long there is food at home for the husband when they come. So this is something that the household caring role, that is something that has not changed, and this continuously comes. I spoke to one local council member recently. I think she was not in the current council, but the previous. She told me that, you know, in her council she's the only woman, and they have 4 other. This was when it was 5 members, 4 other men, and in her island, even at night when there is a boat that is, like, you know, reefed, she will be asked to come and help in the rescue. And then she will also be asked, just because she wants to be equal, just like a man. If there is, in Maldives you do clean the well, yeah, Valudiya hikkun. So for that also they will take a turn and say, okay, now it's your turn, so it's you who have to go and do this. But whenever it comes to, like, you know, there is hospitality, when a team from Malay comes, it's your turn, you can go and do the refreshments, you lead that and all this. So this is the kind of understanding that we have even among the people who are being elected. Uh, recent One recent example, I'm sure it's very fresh to our minds, is what happened last Women's Day when Bank of Maldives announced that they are giving the pad free in their toilets. So at the what the stories that I heard were like, the pads were they were going to supply the pads, but at first they didn't have the pads. They asked people to give the receipts so the people will, the bank will reimburse. So the whole concept of and the question that the policymakers keep on asking is, oh, why have women gone so low? Can't women afford pads and things like that? Without really understanding the situation or an event where anybody, any woman, even if the most rich woman, may need a pad in the toilet because you get these things unexpectedly as well. So the whole understanding of facilitating or having policies in place to help women is also so misogynistic at times. So this is something that we have not been able to address much. So this is from very recent, this year, 2019, 21st century, we are talking. And with this type of understanding, I really do not know, the moment you start talking the dialogue on quota system, my God, everyone will hit the roof and say, okay, that is so unfair to the men if you have the quota system. But our political laws and whatever we have right now have layers. Like you have to first contest within the political parties, and then you get the other votes. There are several votings that take place. So the women will get left out in the first filter because to begin with, they don't have resources, they don't have the power, they have to most probably get the blessing from the husband. Often you don't get that. So these are the challenges that you have even to contest at a local primary level. So imagine the kinds of effort that you have to do in the national level. I'm not criticizing anything about the 4 women who got elected, but when you really think about these 4 women, they are not normal people. They are people who are already in the elite groups. They have been backed by, their families, political parties, and these 4 women had campaigning from the current president as well as President Nasheed. So they've had very strong political backing for them to get elected because, even if they didn't do much, I'm sure they have all the credentials. They are qualified, as Anissa had mentioned, but they got elected also because of who they are. So these are the kinds of challenges that we have to break, and I don't know how, I don't know the magic formula, but I know being within the status quo, this will never change. You have to have something outside of the box. You have to be the crazy one. You have to be the disobedient one to be able to get through. Otherwise, you can't even speak anywhere.
While we were having that discussion, I was reminded of a couple of stories when I was out doing some research. I had the privilege of doing research on perceptions about women's participation in public life back in 2014. And I went to Formula. And I spoke to a man and was having a conversation about why are there no women councillors on that island. And he says to me, how can women sit in the council, because they will have to go and look at the land and go into the taro fields and I mean, this is dirty work. A woman can't do this. But if you've been to Formula, you will see it's the women working in the taro fields. Now, this level of understanding of one's environment, this level of consciousness does exist. And how do we address, it's like seeing this glass of water and like saying, but there isn't one here. I mean, the evidence is staring you in the face. But this is a reality we have in our communities, where people literally do not believe their eyes. They literally do not compute what their eyes are seeing. And as Anissa says, what do we do about this? Do we get them glasses, or I don't know. But something has to be done. And I think it needs to be done at the level of the schools. Children should be taught honestly. Children should be taught, because children are honest. Adults, well, the thing is, there's a really bad cycle going on here. A child will question, but an adult will shut them up. We have a serious problem in our schools of children not being able to have a conversation. That is one thing. That has to seriously change for our children to actually grow into adulthood and trust themselves when they see that it is actually a woman in the taro field, and there's no reason why she cannot work in the council, because she can go wherever she wants and do whatever needs doing as a councillor. This level of disconnect is in people's minds, and this has to really change. Coming back to the question of quota, I think we have a solution. We provided policy recommendations for the current government, and we said, the thing is, okay, let's not talk about quotas. Let's look at the reality. When you look at political parties, every party has members who are men and women, and they are pretty much well represented equally. In some parties, there are more women. In most parties, there is an equal number of women. So how is it that the National Council in the largest political party has 100 men and 8 women? How is this so? What political parties need to do is to change their system to a more honest system, where their membership is represented in their hierarchy. Because every member brings in money to the party in our system, but that money is not working for the women, because women don't have a say in decision making. And this has to stop. This has to stop. And this is actually staring us in the face. Our proposition is to make a change to the Political Parties Act to ensure that when candidates are chosen, that they are representative of the gender representation in the party. That would be fair. But of course, it is the unfairness of the whole system that leaves us in this sorry place where we do not have a say of women in our parliament.
I also, on a positive note, have to mention that we do have a gender equality law. Yes. But that's all that's positive really about it. We do no, because it's very much window dressing. There's nothing substantial coming out of it. The willingness to actually implement anything meaningful is yet to be seen. But I suppose what I want to say is that what people need to understand, including women and men, is that it, I, well, a lot of times people would tell me, you know, Shujin, why do you keep talking about equality? The 5 fingers on your palm are not equal. Sure, fine enough, fair enough. But should I not have 1 finger, I would have a problem. So what I keep telling them is like, yes, I'm not saying we're the same. I'm saying we can contribute differently, we have different experiences, but we you know, it's all of us who will make that difference. And it's not just the men, not just the women. Just because somebody climbs a coconut palm doesn't mean I have to want to or need to or have to prove that I can climb a coconut palm. It's not about that. If I wanted to, and like say for example, if when you're young, the girls will be dressed in pretty frocks and maybe high-heeled shoes, and whoever wants to climb up will not really be able to climb up, but the boys can. So my point being, you would have to be able to do what you want to do or achieve what you want to do. But it also has to come with the understanding that it needs everybody's lived realities are important. And to have 4 people in parliament doesn't really reflect that, where, you know, men and women are equal in society in terms of numbers alone. And going back to GEL, and if we really wanted to make a difference, say for example, state-owned companies, why can't half of the boards be women, really? It's not like we have a shortage of women to be on boards. So why not that? Like, if we can't get people elected for various reasons, which I think is wrong, but what if we started to push women forward? Why does it have to be a man? Or because there are, like, when you look at the numbers, say with lawyers, with almost all fields of education, almost. Some areas women are more dominant, say for example teaching and nursing and medical, but others men are. But then overall, when you look at the numbers, there are prevalently more women than men. So why are we really lagging behind when it comes to more decision-making roles? Why are, like, Fatuma at home making bhajia should be able to have a say, because whatever the men do, or the women, hopefully, when we do have some, decide, impacts her, whether she knows it or not. So why can't we have a system where she is able to have a voice, where she is able to have a say? I'm sure Shadia will gladly tell you about the Kuridu Fushi Kuri and how it impacted women, because it was a decision that to build the airport, so the Kuli was reclaimed, but it was a source of income for so many women who did coir ropes. So, but that was not quite a factor because that was negligible. But this was a source of income for so many women, say for example. But
Okay, I am from Kuludupushi, so that's why maybe she prompted me to speak about, like, you know, this informal sector economic activities, and not only for the women of Kuludupushi. I fear because, like, you know, we see so many decision-making bodies which are male dominant. Yeah, I see, like, you know, there is a lot of infrastructure development happening where a lot of the work that women do in the informal sector have or is being marginalized so much. Last December, I was also traveling to compile the CEDAW state report, and the kinds of stories that the women were sharing with us was very, very sad. Like, you know, a lot of them, they come and say they are single parents. The only thing that they get is the single parent allowance, which the government has decided to pay only because the fathers are not doing their duties of paying the child support. So if it was like, you know, I'm sure women in the leadership or in the decision-making tables most probably the family law would be the one that will be strengthened to make sure the fathers actually do take the responsibility. But now it's everybody's taxpayers' fund is being utilized. So these are the kinds of flaws that we see in the decisions that are being made because we are not really looking at the issues of men and women impacting differently. And okay, they get the 2,000 rupiah. So I said, look, how do you live with that? And she said, okay, this 2,000 rupiah is just enough to pay utilities and whatnot. So I said, look, how do you then survive? And she said, she collects the nuts, kanamadu. And this is also like, picked up. And this is hard work, really, to pick those nuts and make the kanamadu. And we all enjoy the kanamadu cake, don't we? But what is happening with development is, with the city hotels and all that, people are pushing women out of that. And then chopping all the kanamadu trees and, taking away the livelihoods of women who make the ends meet when we don't have any. And we were forced to, a lot of the women were forced to migrate to Hulumale in 500 square feet, apartments. Maybe, Ati, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But the problem is, these apartment, open plan kitchen, small apartments is blind to the livelihoods of women. There are several women who have moved from the islands for their kids' education or husband's employment or for whatever reason, because there's a huge pull factor here. Because we've been made to understand that is development. So the concrete structures, even if you are disabled, you won't be able to get up those places, the social housing or whatever you call it. And we are talking about a planned city where majority of the buildings are not accessible for people with special needs. So when we do the planning, when we do the housing, when we do other policies, if you are not thinking about the inclusion of the people who are left behind, I'm not only talking about women, the people who are less, more vulnerable than you, the people who are making decisions. If you only think about yourself, you will never be able to make the system conducive to this. A lot of the women who have been migrated to the Hulumale apartments don't have any means of livelihood. And this is the thing that, from income generating people to become dependents, and having housing like this will also be so expensive in the long run when you have an increasing population and an increasing aging population. So, it's when you talk about gender equality or any other policy, even in the tourism, when you just blindly expand tourism, you can see the people who are negatively impacted the most are the people who are women, who don't have any other means of employment, who don't have any other means of a livelihood. So we have to always be mindful about the people who are the farthest behind. Even when you make a jetty, or when you make an airport, or when you make a city hotel, or if you plan to build an apartment block, so that different needs of peoples are really taken care of in these policies.
I just want to add, said certain things that we may be able to do, like temporary special measures or whatever you want to call it. You just mentioned that you have proposed to the current government about the Political Party Act amendments to it. When the Political Party Act was last reviewed in the Parliament, from our organization, we proposed amendments. Every political party must be made to actually, on their electoral list, they must have 1/3 of women. So, because starting from there, instead of actually having quotas per se, legal quotas. But that becomes a legal quota too, but starting from the political parties. At the committee, when they were discussing, they didn't want to even take that into consideration, so that was put aside. Prior to that, when we were amending the constitution, the current constitution, I did actually propose a quota for women. The first one was voted down because I said 15% of the party, Majlis must be women. That was voted down. Well, we expected that because very few women, but we also had some of our colleagues, male colleagues, who voted for it. The second one, I said, okay, I will propose another thing. 10 seats, this is a national constituency, but 10 seats only for women, for 2 terms only. These are all temporary. The speaker of the time didn't even put it on the agenda. We protested. All the women in the parliament at that time, the Majlis at that time, protested. 3 sessions, the speaker had to stop because he couldn't go, because I refused to sit down. I stood up, I said, I am not going to sit down until you put this on the agenda. He refused. After 3 sessions, finally he said, I am not going to put it on the agenda because it is already voted down. I said, Mr. Speaker, what was voted down was 15% of the parliament. I am talking about 10 seats now. But he said no, and that is it. No was said, so it didn't work. And gender equality bill, when it was discussed in the parliament, again from our organization, we got one of the parliamentarians to propose quotas. Very few people voted for it, so that was also voted down. That's why I say, we take this to the parliament, nothing gets done because the parliamentarians there only think of the first past the post system of electoral system. They don't want to change it because our voters, though 50% of the voters are women, our women also think like the men do in these areas. So the voters are not going to vote for women. And everybody says, like all of you pointed out, women have to be particularly skilled in everything, You have to have a certain qualifications, educational qualifications. You should be able to speak in public. You must be skilled for it. You must have the resources. You must have all that. Now, this time, among the contestants, there were certain women who could challenge any man in public speaking with political backgrounds. Even they were not. So the arguments actually don't match with the reality. So that is why we have to work, I don't know, around people or through them. I just don't know how to do it. We have to do something about it.
We have to develop a vaccine for it. To go back about the issue of excluding women. Ati, did you have something to say? Sorry. So sorry about that.
The issue is posed on me. I think I should. Thank you for inviting me over here. Actually, I really wanted to come over here. I was in Addo when I was called for, and I just make a quick trip and came over. This is a nice conversation. I'm glad I'm here and now taking up the Housing Ministry's portfolio. I think I should be here today as putting forward women's agenda and women in public life. My public life started off with a very difficult profession, which women still are finding hard to come in. That is engineering. I'm a civil engineer by profession. Anyway, now coming up with this Housing Ministry's mandate, which I was given with, I started working inside the ministry and realized there's a lot of limitations which are definitely we are going through a firefighting system. The policies still remain and we are just fighting on every day with what was left behind by the previous office as well. But still the policies has to go through. We have to go through with this government's policies. Anyway, looking at some of the regulations I had in my hand, we have a regulatory arrangement where, when housing plots are released in the islands and public housing are released in the islands, we have a committee. And then, first change I made through with the committee was, is that a woman member should be in the committee. It was difficult, but anyway, I was able to make it through. And then I started fighting so that the women have more ownership in housing. I started working on it, and then, unfortunately, I'm given a little round table of women political appointees right now with me, the only woman there.
Anyway, I started talking about women should have more ownership in housing and we should advocate for it. And I was told, look, the law doesn't allow it. And I said, no, the law already allows it. And I know for sure that the family law went through a change very recently, where I was thinking when the woman get divorced, there was a better arrangement for the woman. I was very sick when these changes were made, so I wasn't able to follow it up quite well. And I argued very well. I said, no, this also has already been changed after the woman is married for such and such a long time. We are entitled for the development we made for the housing and for the family to be together. And anyway, I had a look at this law. They all agreed, we should have a better arrangement so that the women should be able to have better ownership or, reach out for the. When the applications are also made, mostly the man will apply for it. But anyway, to encourage more women to come up, even I wanted to do this. And then I called Madam Manisa and I told her, look, this change has been made, isn't it? And she said, yes, we all advocated for it. And then I took up this amendment. And then, cleverly, the change which was made doesn't allow for the change which we were looking for.
Except if we have a prenup.
Yes. Which was very unfortunate. Now I'm backfooted again. But anyway, I have to talk to you, Sujun, now that we have to enable this environment. We have to enable this environment so that, when the woman also applies for it or the co-owner application is applied, we can at least give a better ranking for the woman, the co-ownership. Yeah, we should make it. But as I told you, I'm also going through a lot of firefighting right now. The policies, I hope to come up with this with the new parliament when it comes as well. So, these are the limitations we have for the woman to own a housing as well. And we will fight for it. We have 33% women in the parliament, in the cabinet as well, which is a very good number. We can fight together and we can get a lot of things done. But unfortunately, I was very, very sad to see less women elected in the parliament this time. As Hume has rightfully mentioned, they would be making laws for them, for men. And the discussion when a woman enters, have a deliberation in the parliament is quite different. And the parliament also consists of committees which deliberate on issues. So amongst the 4 women, how many would be in the most of these development committees? I have a problem to understand. Anyway, through the joint manifesto we put in through for this government, we have a special quota arrangement which was approved by the 4 parties, that women should be given a positive discrimination quota for a while. So this is the time I think we should start again energy, putting up our energy together to push in this quota through the gender ministry so that, it will be taken up very quickly. And even though the parliament session would have started by then, the remaining session of that term, at least the allowed quota, women could move into the parliament. It is because the nation is going through a lot of development changes, like Shadia has mentioned, infrastructure development and other policies. So this is even it's much late already. But this is the time for us to have more women inside there, so that women issues are deliberated and women's viewpoint on development issues are quite different. And one more thing I would like to mention is that I was really shocked to hear very recently that when there was a interest by the candidate, by the one of the parliamentarians who want to be a speaker of the parliament, an Islamic scholar stating that, woman cannot be a parliamentarian speaker. These are issues we should pick up, Where is it written that a woman cannot be a speaker of the parliament? These are the things we should pick up. And if another question is posed on me, I will pick up again, but I will try to listen and learn from you as well to see what I can do within the ministry to make my ministry more positive towards women's rights. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to pick up on where you left off. If it's a woman, you like I said, you have to prove yourself. And I've just blanked myself out. I'm sorry. Apologies. I really wanted to say something about something you've said, but then I've kind of blanked out. Sorry. I'm sure it'll come to me.
Perhaps you could continue while we wait.
Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me an opportunity. I think it's high time to raise a man's voice in this panel discussion. When I talk about bridging the gap, and first let me congratulate the Uthama NGO for initiating this panel discussion. I wish we have more of this, more frequently, so that there can be awareness raised. And I have heard very depressing stories, and I'm really disheartened to hear one of my boss before, who was deputy speaker of the Majlis, Madam Manis, is saying it's regressing now, the situation, which is very, very disappointing. But I think, I would love now, because we have a few minutes now left, I think before 6, to hear some strategic foresight where what can we take home after this panel discussion? What concrete constructive, what you call, commitment we can make or generate at this panel discussion. So if you allow me to make some proposals, some ideas, I would think, this is the time that the National Development Plan, I think it's 7th National Development Plan, is being worked out, and I think there was an NGO forum to contribute to this National Development Plan, and I want to urge you that your panel go through this National Development Plan and see whether there are words or sentences or concerns that raise, that towards the impediment of promoting women's rights. And also now, this is the time that the national debate competition is being held, and the Weibo Academy has been busy. They're training a lot of students, and I don't know how many topics are covered in their competition about gender or women's rights. Now, these are the areas, and some are saying that even the vocabulary needs to be modified or changed in order to remove or introduce new gender, what you call, insensitive or gender-friendly terms. A lot of advertisements on our TV, we hear that things, that pictures, the graphics that are deploring women. I think you should speak up and say, that couple of, and some of you have said about the parliament, which is very sad to hear that. Through that, we have in fact, in this session, 19th Majlis, there's going to be one short than the outgoing Majlis. But why don't you start a lobby saying that, okay, if not a female speaker, why not deputy speaker be a female? Why don't you start a lobby? Some representation can be, yeah. So, and also many developed countries, democratic countries, there is a special standing committee for gender empowerment or looking to the questions of gender imbalance. At least human rights committee should be there in the Majlis. We don't have such a committee, so you can start lobbying 19 Majlis. We should have human rights, a committee that's looking to human rights. And of course, within human rights, gender is a big issue. I think it can be covered. So just a few thoughts, and I also think that I don't see any politicians here. I don't see even religious scholars. We need to have dialogue with them. You're talking about inclusive. We should invite more. Maybe you invited. I don't see any of them here. But I give commitment as the president of the Civil Service Commission. In our rules and also regulations, we ensure that there will be no imbalance against gender, say females. And we are proud to see 64% are female in civil service. But we need people, more promoters, guardians, defenders, advocates to come and join with us too. We have advisory committee. We will invite you all, Permanent Secretary's platform, to come and discuss if you have concerns. And I hope you will have a kind of a dialogue already created or established with gender ministry. And I wish you also review the textbooks to see how much is, knowledge is incorporated in the textbooks, whether they are gender sensitive or gender imbalance. So these are the areas probably you can look up and have some strategic foresight and start working. We are committed, we will help you definitely. Don't look at men as your, what do you call, abusers, but that was those days perhaps. Now we'll be heard about it. But so not every man is abusive and degrading to women. But we have cultural barriers which we are trying to, we all can walk out and try to overcome these barriers. And I'm really happy to observe that a lot of comments we receive Maldives being the country with the best, among the South Asian countries, the status of women now the best in South Asia is supposed to be Maldives. And therefore, we are not complacent, of course, we need more. And so if these are some thoughts I will throw in for your consideration. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Shamim's intervention has prompted me to say certain things, a few things, First of all, I don't think any one of us say men are abusive. No, we're not saying. It's the mindset. That mindset has to be changed. And it's not men, so it's men and women. The mindset has to be changed. Another thing is, when I was in the parliament, I did a lot of work trying to organize a gender advocacy group there. Not even, the formal committee, but at least a group. So that that particular group will look into all the bills when they come to the parliament and see, where the gender disaggregation or discrimination is there. So anyway, it didn't work because I think I was the only one who thought there was some use for it. And we also talk about civil service having 64% women, which is very true, and we are happy about it. But we are not too happy again because at the executive level, the percentage drops suddenly. It's a drastic reduction. So that is why we're not happy, because we would like that to be a little more balanced. Talking about educational sector, we are happy. But again, 65 to 75% graduates are women, but in the labor force, it's not reflected. So we're not happy. So we can't be happy about these things unless we find practical change in the life of women. Then another thing I wanted to say, now I've forgotten also that. No, I think we're all getting it. So
yeah, there's so much to say, and if I may grab the mic just for a moment, seeing as Dr. Shamim from the Civil Service Commission has specifically mentioned what can be done, and I think there's a lot that can be done, but we also need to see leadership from institutions, and yours is a case in point, because our data shows that in managerial, in support and general services, I have some data from 2010, but I don't think this data has been filtered in exactly the same way more recently. But our findings were that 52% of the permanent civil servants were women, even then, 2010. Now, just recently, in 2018, the figure is 55.6%. This is in the state report to the CEDAW committee. So I presume this is from the National Bureau of Statistics, and this is accurate and credible information. Now, what we found in 2010 was, in managerial services, there were 58% women and 42% men. Managerial services, these are the people actually making the civil service function. But when it came to executive services, the whole thing reverses. So women 34%, men 66%. Now there's something wrong here. There's something really badly wrong that stops women from getting to executive level in the civil service. That study is what the Civil Service Commission can commission to understand why that is so. What is stopping the Commission being able to appoint women who have experience, who have knowledge, who have education, who are serving in managerial services, making decisions at executive levels. What is the gap there? So that is one gap we could try to bridge. And I'm sure you are, as you are on board, that is very, very encouraging for us. And I would like that to see that happen. Just before I finish, just very quickly, I would like to take you back to some findings in 2000. I know what happened in history is a reflection of what may happen in the future as well. And we know that these are cultural and behavioral practices that are leaving women behind. Now, I'd like to quote this. While women dominate the health and education sectors, men generally hold the better paid and higher status jobs. While women comprised 67% of employment in 1996, only 21% of females occupied executive level positions in 1997. In the education sector, where women are accounted for 51% of all staff, women occupy 9% of the executive level jobs. These are the gaps we are talking about. At the level of schools, only 2% of headmasters and 20% of principals were females. So these gaps are everywhere. It's not just here, it's not like in single digits. It's everywhere. This is consistent and constant throughout the system. And these are the gaps that need to be addressed by the institutions to ensure that this discrimination is not practiced as normal. This is not normal. This is wrong. On one final point, I'd like to add National Development Plan. Now, National Development Plan is happening at a rapid pace, I believe, to the point that even the planners are not able to keep up. Now, what quality of national development planning can we have when there is such a rush to get this thing on paper that when we look at it later, we don't know who did what and what this means and how it reflects on what we do next. It has to be coherent. It has to make sense. It has to be usable. It has to be implementable.
And it's only for 5 years this time around.
Well, yes. It's 5 years what we have to look at. We cannot just look at the tips of our noses as a national development plan. This is not national development in the same way we call ourselves rich. So I could go on, but I will stop there and let Shadia have the mic.
Can I? Okay. Yeah, I just remembered what I wanted to say. No, because we were also talking about equality and how we're in the best position in terms of South Asia. Going perhaps in many ways, and of course our constitution says we're equal, but in many areas it stops very much there. Say, for example, the female speaker issue you took up. I can remember when I was still a judge, there was actually a fatwa number 4, to be very exact, by the FIG Academy, which is state endorsed, who came up with the fatwa that women can't be judges. And this is after the current constitution was in place. So if the state is able to act on something, it didn't have any legal status, the FIG Academy back then. However, despite it not having any legal status, if the state is willing to succumb to that and act on it, then where do we stand, even though our constitution says we're equal? I can remember when I was still a sitting judge, we complained because the family court issued this announcement to say, asking for mauzun, people who solemnize marriages. And it was categorically only for males. So 3 judges, myself included, all female, we protested and wrote a letter to the Chief Justice and the family court because the announcement was from the family court. The result was that our capacity, what was it? Our capacity as judges was being reviewed by the Judicial Services Commission for having asked that question.
They started
Despite
an
the fact,
investigation.
yes, and investigation went on for about 3 years. But this is despite the fact that the Constitution allows for it, the family law allows for it, but an announcement negated this. What legal capacity does that have? So yes, on pen and paper, black and white, it might look very pretty, but the reality is, unfortunately, it's not. And if I may go on to comment about the Civil Service Commission, I had this dilemma because I was told when the Civil Service Commission, initially came into being, and when there was some dispute as to whether the judges were part of the Civil Service Commission, I don't know why, but and later when the dress code came into place, that I have to dress a particular way because the Civil Service Commission dress code obliged me to, and I was like, A, I'm not part of the civil service. 2, it is freedom of expression as far as I can see it, because you really can't ask people not to color their hair, except if it's black. Black is also color. Or you can't ask people to wear shirts that are yay, so long as you're presentable and you're decent, I think it should be fine. But then there are also, because for women, unfortunately, maybe you don't see it that way, but then for women, there are so many ways and measures in which things are put in where we're being continually controlled and continually told how and where to go and do what and say what. And that's the top and bottom of it, really. And by men, most of the time. So that's what we're having a problem with, to be very honest.
Okay,
It's already 6 o'clock. I'm
Okay,
really
my
sorry.
last
Yes,
comment,
yes.
yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to highlight, I've been in UNFPA since 97. And we've done a lot of work in terms of awareing or in terms of empowering men and women that, we have equal chances to be able to, gain from development. And that's all what we have been doing. And the other work that we've been doing to make the policy changes in terms of even having a budget for, women's empowerment and all that. Sadly, until today, this sort of women empowerment or giving women equal chance and opportunity becomes a charity work kind of thing. And I am also quite actively involved in the national development planning process, as well as in the transition process, where we had provided a lot of recommendations to even set up the Ministry of Gender. But unfortunately, the budgets are being developed with policies, or policies are the things that will be budgeted. But when you have bad policies, what is budgeted for are bad. It doesn't really bring equality into place. So I think, to have a change, we really seriously need to change the policies. And that is where the effort has been very minimal, and where we have not seen much change, because at the decision-making tables, we don't have women. We have people who are think from an economic point of view, and in infrastructure development and all that. So the social development has been very very small. So with that, I think no matter how many laws that we have, unless we have adequate budget for it, and unless it is seen equally as economic development, or if we don't recognize the people who are being left behind through the economic development, we are going to remain the same even 20 years after. Maybe we'll come and say the same thing, unless we change the way we plan policies.
Thank you.
if I may just add on the economic development thing.
Just while you're mentioning, we haven't had an opportunity to actually open the floor for questions. Do please think of questions while Ume is just rounding up. And thank you so much for your time, but I thought that some of these things are really important, and we never do have this sort of opportunity to express ourselves. So thank you.
With the evidence.
Yeah.
We always look at the evidence, and we believe the evidence. I just wanted to add quickly on the economic development aspect. Now, we have a situation where economic development is perceived as infrastructure development to the detriment of everyone. The concrete, the huge shipments of this, that, and the other, the destruction of our ecosystems, all these things, these are the resources on which we exist. And yet, we have decision makers who have no regard for the land, for the little land that we are standing on, which is why our reefs are being dredged, our reefs are being claimed. They're not reclaimed, they are claimed. Our lagoons are being claimed as though, you know, as someone on Twitter said, this is not being reclaimed, this was never land. So this is not reclaiming land, this is claiming a lagoon. And what it actually does, we do not know, because we are destroying nature at a rate that we do not understand, we do not comprehend the impact of this, and we also know that we have a global problem. So we don't add to the global problem with local problems. We cannot be champions of the environment while destroying it. And this is the kind of dichotomy we have. So what I want to really emphasize is the issue of not being able to see the value of our resources. Kurudufushi Kuli is a classic case in point. The women who use Kurudufushi Kuli to make rope make an income of 8.7 million rupiah, which is $500,000 US per year. If that livelihood was being earned by men and it was going to be wiped out in a matter of a few days, that will not happen. But 404 families were removed from their livelihoods because decision makers decided to put an airport on that natural ecosystem. And now we have no idea how the airport will fare. We have climate change. We have, Kurudufushi Kuli is the flood mitigation system of the island. It has been destroyed. We don't know what impact Kurudufushi will suffer as a result. Of course, we know the impact the women will suffer. So when we talk about policy and when we talk about the benefits and the costs of making these decisions, we really have to have the say of women. Because if you go and ask the women of Kurudufushi, they will give a different story to the people who advocated to have this change. So I just wanted to add that, because that is one of the biggest issues we have, and I think all of us really need to pay careful attention to how our decision makers are destroying our country.
Thank you, Hume. And I do realize that we are short of time, but questions? Do you have?
Like a shower. When do you think we can have women president in the world?
Let's talk about speaker.
Yeah, let's choose one. Let's pick from the back.
Hi. I think this whole idea of gradual is something we need to, work away from. I mean, whenever we talk about a quota for the parliament, we see people saying, let's have 2 women on the boards, let's have, 30% on the councils. No, we are ready, we are qualified, and we should be given the equal representation. So, it's very frustrating that every time we have this conversation, it always ends up with, no, let's give this percent, let's start from the bottom, let's start from our companies, let's give them 2 seats at the board, let's give 2, let's have 3 ministers, let's have 30% of council. No. I mean, the statistics clearly say that women are qualified and we are ready. We just need to see the barriers that is restricting us from taking us to the next level. We need to be there, we need to have equal representation, and this is the time.
Thank you. Additional comments? Anyone else? Comments? Questions? Speak up.
So just wanted to add to what Na said. I think it was 2 years ago, I asked one of the CEOs of a state-owned company that, because I saw a photo on the newspaper that, the president with all of the CEOs, and it was all men. Then I said, how come this is an all-men picture, and why aren't women given the opportunity? And his answer to me was what really put me off the most, because what he said was, I don't think women are going to be able to navigate through all of the things that we go through. And I think I spent another 1 hour lecturing him on how that we are ready and that we could, and it's unfair that women are not given the opportunity. So I think it's the mindset that needs to change, and the fact that the mindset has to change from from the school system, because every day we work with colleagues that undermine us, although we are in the same level.
Thank you. Any? Yes.
Thank you for inviting us. I just want to highlight one problem that I have been noticing in our society. The biggest problem I think we have is women undermining women. That is the first actually problem that we have to address. Unless we stand up for our women, I don't think there will be any change in our what we have been talking about. So that is, I think, the first thing that we have to address. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that bears true for for the situation. And as Anissa has said, she's been saying the same thing for 20 years, and still we are saying the same thing. And I'll probably be saying the same thing for the next 20 years as well. So are there any questions or comments? I know it's really long, but thank you. Thank you for your enthusiasm as well.
Hello. My question is, since we are talking about the gap, are you planning to do any research on, why the gap is there? Because I think it's really important to know why the problem exists. Yeah, that's my question. And actually, I also would like to share some of my experiences as well. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I've been providing therapy and counseling for a lot of people. And interestingly, I have met with a lot of clients, when they start therapy, they are they really want to have this take therapy. And then after some time, suddenly they stop therapy. And then there are cases where they bring kids to the therapy, and then suddenly they vanishes. And then what happens is, later on we came to know that, someone in the position father doesn't want their kids to continue therapy or their wives to continue therapy because they don't think that it's necessary. So the problem lies in, making decisions. So this is a huge problem, I guess. And then the other thing I've noticed is that I've seen clients from islands as well, and then teenagers as well. And then in the cases of abuse, they were told that, abuse from fathers, stepfathers, brothers, and neighbors, they were repeatedly told that, like, you shouldn't be talking about this. I mean, these things happen in life, and this is how it is, but you shouldn't be talking about it. Women, we are suppressed. I mean, to a point that like, we really think that it's a norm. It's happening everywhere. I mean, this is life. And like, this is not only women's problem, this is not only men's problem, it's the problem of our society. It's ingrained in our society. So we need to change from the level, education system, from the school system as well. For me, now I'm working on setting up a new mental health facility in Male. It's called Tiba. I'm promoting myself as well. It's called Tiba. So Tiba is you, our clients. Actually, we are referring to our clients. And the moment, until a few days back, my thinking was like, I'm providing a service. And this is how I can provide my service to the country. Like, I never thought myself as an entrepreneur, like as a businesswoman. Like, someone told me, hey, look, you're not just a service provider, you're an entrepreneur as well. And then, like, it didn't occur to me before. I mean, this is what happens to our women, our girls. They are, like, always told that you are the softer gender or person. Like, you shouldn't be thinking of, like, you have to reach higher. Like, this thing, we don't have that kind of thing. I'm very nervous, actually. A bit trembling because of, not because of cold as well. Okay, so we are always told that, like, you shouldn't be thinking about the positions, the things that you can do, but we need to educate our children as well that you are capable of doing well and you are capable of reaching to that level as well. I mean, that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
The question? Answer to the question.
The question about research.
Yes.
Actually, I think there's plenty of research. There's a lot of research, and I think we are kind of overwhelmed with the amount of research we have. We just got to do something about these issues. And what we will do, how we will do it, and what we will do is the domain of the decision makers. The research is there to inform what the situation is. The National Bureau of Statistics have a lot of data. Just recently, they produced the Household Income and Expenditure Survey. It tells us lots of things. That should be used in the National Development Plan. I don't know to what extent these things are studied to inform the National Development Plan, so that actually the decisions that are made have the desired result at the end. I think we have a culture of just doing things for the sake of doing things, and that really is counterproductive because we're just wasting our time. And that's why we want to see people actually doing things. We want to see women stand up and say, look, we want to have our say. We can no longer sit back and watch. We have to, we demand. We have to demand this. We can't just be expected to be quiet, be soft, be this, be that. We can no longer be a stereotype, basically. So I think our intention is also to encourage women to say, look, this is not good enough. This is not good enough to have 4 women in the Majlis. It is not good enough not to have women in the courts. It is not good enough that women are not making decisions in the civil service. This is simply not good enough. It is also not good enough to have 35% cabinet ministers as women. It's just not good enough. We are in 2019.
We can do better.
We can do better.
Thank you. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your, yeah. And I've been told that there's tea outside, and it's been a really long time. Yeah.
The tea is coming here.
Oh, tea is coming here? Right, okay. Sorry.
So I have
Yes.
a final note of thanks to give after Atika.
I thought we have wound up, that's why I want to say something. I would like to see another session of Bridge the Gap, but I would like the woman to be facing towards us, you know. Rather than just so...
We are going to the end and we'll turn around.
I know this is not the time to speak, but actually I want to pick up actually from the last suggestion for more sessions. Let me start by thanking the organizers for organizing this very, very, very informative, educative session. And I would like, number one, to propose the second session should be for the new parliament. The second session on bridging the gap should be for the new parliament. Once the new parliament is in session, I believe we should have this discussion there so that at least people understand, well, with only 4 women in the new parliament, there are so many things that men have to do to correct the situation, at least to look at the laws and the legislation in a different way, to change the mindset. Number 2, I just want to say that, a quota system, 10%, 15%, is unfair, is unethical, is illegal. What I would suggest, honestly, for the cabinet, for the parliament, for any position in the civil service at whatever level, the quota should be 50-50. That's what should be. And if you have a society where the population of women is more than the population of men, then the quota should be based on the percentage of the population of men and women. And within that, we should reflect also the age composition, because now we have more and more people of my age, old, in so many positions, and the young people who are really frustrated outside there, they don't feel that the decisions that are made are reflective of their views, of their expectations and aspirations. So I think as well we want, as much as we want to have the sex equality, I wouldn't call it gender, I would call it the sex equality, we want also to have fair representation of the different age groups in the different positions in decision making. This is all very important. Lastly, I want to say the gap is not actually anything other than the injustice inside us. That's the gap. We are failing as human beings to see ourselves equal. We always look for something to make someone less than me. This thing could be the gender, it could be at a certain setting, the ethnic background, it could be the religion background, but it's the injustice in us that we need to address. That is the real fundamental cause for all the injustice, whether it's related to women and men, to ethnic groups or whatever. So that's why we should, I believe, put a lot of energy and a lot of focus to change. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on that very positive note, I would actually love to have the opportunity to speak to the members of the new parliament. We did find this opportunity one time in our advocacy when we were trying to get the Domestic Violence Prevention Act passed, and we requested the Speaker of the Parliament for us to have an audience with the committee, and we had that opportunity, and it was a very revealing experience. We had very insightful comments from various members, and it gives us perspective also, how they think about the issues on which they will be making law. But as we all know, the Domestic Violence Prevention Act is still to be budgeted. It's still, after how many years? 2012 was when it was passed. 7 years on, it's actually one of the first laws that had a requirement to it. We don't make laws with budgets assigned to it, you know, and this law is still pending that action. Yes, exactly. Yeah, the parliament has to ensure, because parliament passes. To do so, it can't even do. Of parliamentarians is very poor in the Maldives. We may consider ourselves far, developed and well off than many others. I personally would not compare our gender, our women's situation to anywhere else in the region, because we are not. We have strong women. We do not have a lot of challenges that elsewhere. This is the question. This is the gap we are talking about. This is not where we are is not where we should be in context. So just to wrap up, I would like to thank all of you for being here, for listening to us, and for contributing and providing comments and thoughts. I want to I would like to thank Madam Mumina for spending so much time with us and for being here, because we were so excited when you said you would come. And we are thrilled to have you here. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And of course, we thank our donors, the European Union in Sri Lanka and Maldives. We would like to give a huge thanks to the live streaming company who has provided this service pro bono, Half Court company. I would also like to thank our great graphic designer who has provided these excellent graphics, and the artist who provided the artwork. Something like this, we think, takes, it's just a gathering in 2 hours, and it takes a lot of planning, a lot of effort by a lot of people to deliver. And we want to thank Shari for constantly taking pictures of all of us. And I know, I have every confidence there'll be excellent photographs. And of course, I want to thank all of us for sitting here and telling stories that we have never told in a public forum before. But this is what we have to do and what we are willing to do, and we feel we must do to push for a better position for women in this country and elsewhere too. So thank you so much, and I hope you will join us for some refreshments. Thank you. Thank you.